Hi everybody, it's Andy here. This is the Atheism UK podcast, and we've got Rich. Yes, we've got cups of tea as well for
Hello.
Hi everyone.
our chat today. Pratt, and I don't mean that
Don't be
personal.
personal, yeah. Or maybe you do, I don't know.
Pratt arguments we're talking about today. Just so you know, that's point refuted 1,000 times.
Or previously refuted 1,000 times.
Previously,
yeah. I think I like previously rather than point, simply because it does sort of clarifies the fact that we have spoken about this 1,000 times.
Yeah. So, Embers, do you want to sort of kick this off and just give us a little bit of a breakdown on this?
Sure. Yeah, such a lovely word, and nice to be able to use Pratt in a real context, isn't it? So, absolutely love it. Do look it up though, as what it means, apart from what we're saying, because it's not what people think it actually means.
Yeah.
Anyway, as you've just been saying, yes, previously refuted 1,000 times. Actually, that's not quite right. I think we should change the acronym, because it's millions and millions of times. Stop thousands of times. So we're talking about biblical scripture, or any sort of scripture or religious claims that atheists again and again and again have given evidence and shown evidence to the people who keep supporting this evidence despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. That's why we call it Pratt, previous refuted 1,000 times. One of the biggest ones for me is when people say the Bible is the word of God, and it's been shown time and time again with evidence that's so overwhelming it's not true. Actually, it is true, but historians, theologians, and by theologians I don't mean religious people, I mean people who actually study theology, they study scripture, they study the history of the scripture. We know that things like the Bible are not the word of God. They are man-made, and all the evidence that atheists and historians and scientific community provides to people who keep saying it's the word of God and it's divinely inspired, they just won't listen. This is why we keep saying Pratt. I know, Rich, you've got thousands of examples.
Oh,
yes, yourself. So do you want to give an example of that?
Here's one that will make you groan. This one is one of the many creationist or anti-evolution arguments that's out there. If we come from monkeys, why are there still monkeys? That is one of my absolute favourites, and and we know how to debunk that because it has been debunked so many times. We don't come from monkeys; we share a common ancestor with modern day monkeys. And if you actually look at the history of the evolution of our combined species, we are in the same branch of the evolutionary tree as old world monkeys, new world monkeys. In fact, if you go back, you're part of that one evolutionary bush.
It's the great apes, isn't it?
Yeah.
The thing that I think it'd be good to point out, though, is a lot of this does come from ignorance. And when we say ignorance, we're not talking about you're ignorant, you're stupid and ignorant and things like that. Ignorance means you don't know.
Yeah, ignorance and stupidity are two very, very different things.
Yeah.
And I think
people who say that, I want to be charitable, aren't stupid. What's happened is that they've been told this, and they regurgitate this, and on face value, it sort of makes sense to them if they're religious and creationists, that sort of thing. Sort of makes some sort of sense, If we come from monkeys, why are there still monkeys? There must be monkeys, and then we. So in some ways, it sort of makes sense if you don't understand evolution, if you've never studied evolution or even read a book about it. So it is ignorance from that point of view. But the problem that we get is that it isn't just people who are ignorant of that point of view or that concept. These things are often spoken about by people who no, as you say, it's been refuted to their face. It's been refuted.
Yes.
They've been shown the evidence, and then they still carry on with it because it's a good trope, you know. It's a good phrase, and it convinces people who are ignorant of things like evolution, which is
and in fact the majority of the a majority of the big name apologists out there, you know, I have seen debates where William Lane Craig has been thoroughly debunked on the cosmological argument, and I do mean thoroughly debunked on the cosmological argument, and then a couple of months later he appears on a stage with someone else and just repeats the argument that was debunked to his face, you know, only a couple of months beforehand. I've seen other individuals like Ken Ham of the Answers in Genesis fame regurgitate arguments that I have seen him have debunked again to his face.
Yeah.
Although I want to give him one small credit, he does have a section now on his website, which is arguments that creationists shouldn't use because they have been so thoroughly debunked. But there are others that have been just as thoroughly debunked, which he's still using.
Yeah.
Now, is that willful ignorance or is that dishonesty?
It was dishonesty.
It's got to be one or the other. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
with them, it's dishonesty.
The arguments that creationists shouldn't use are all of them.
All of them, yes.
All of them. But it's interesting coming at this from a psychological point of view. People like Ken Ham, as you said, Rich, you know, you've seen it again and again and again. Just, you know, for people watching, just go on YouTube and you'll see debate after debate on the same question, the same topic, where he's thoroughly trounced. And then he just comes back and does another one.
And he claims victory.
But we were saying earlier, weren't we? They're making a living out of this. And also, the thing that occurs to me, who people keep doing the same things again and don't learn anything, they're displaying psychopathic traits. It is very, very weird. Psychopaths don't have any sort of remorse. They don't have any guilt. They just go on and do exactly the same thing, have no shame whatsoever. So that's quite an interesting one, an angle to come at this from. But I'm not going to go into that, obviously.
Oh, I don't know. Let's explore that.
No, not today, because we'll get way off the track, and we might find out we've got psychopathic traits as well. So let's not go down that road.
It's possible. It is possible. But at least we can admit it.
Sorry, Rich. I didn't mean to jump over you. Sorry, carry on.
No. But this is the thing, though. At least we know what they are, and at least we can admit it, and we can try and do something about it. But as I say, one of the things that really gets me about that trait, going back to Ken Ham, actually, the Ken Ham Bill Nye debate that happened now a few years ago, that question, which was asked by one of our team, actually, who was at the debate, and she actually asked, what would change your mind? And Bill Nye said, a piece of evidence, you know, just one piece of evidence that was actually convincing would change my mind. And Ken Ham got up and said, nothing will ever convince me that the word of God is not true. That is the ultimate of closed-mindedness and the ultimate willful ignorance.
It sort of proves that they're not seeking truth. They have no concept of actually finding truth.
Because they think they've already got it, and nothing is allowed to contradict it. But when you start talking to ordinary everyday people who have fallen for this trap, you do get these PRATT arguments coming up, and the vast majority of them, and it's incredibly boring for us. You know, going again, throw back to our debate, our podcast on what is debate worth it, which you can find the link on our channel. You know, we get incredibly bored and frustrated when we keep having these arguments thrown up at us. because it's, oh my God, not the argument from monkeys again, or the second law of thermodynamics from people who don't even know what the laws of thermodynamics actually are. You know, let alone knowing the specifics of that one law of thermodynamics, which actually doesn't disprove evolution at all.
No.
But you can go into the details of what you mean by a closed system, what you mean by disorder and entropy and all that stuff, and it bounces off them because they're not allowed to seek out any other information. I was talking to an ex Jehovah's Witness a while back, and he actually said to me, I literally was not allowed to read anything that contradicted anything that came out of the Watchtower Society. We weren't allowed to read it. We weren't allowed to learn about it. So that and he said, when he used to knock on doors and people would raise these objections, he was told he wasn't to listen to those objections, but just to carry on with the script. And the thing is, a few well-placed questions can throw people right off that script. But yeah, so why are there still monkeys? Second law of thermodynamics. You can't be, again, going back to the previous episode on morality. You can't be good unless you believe in God. Well, we basically stripped that apart, a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
Didn't we? Yeah.
Yeah, and didn't we? I mean, there are so many of these, and it's not just in religion; it's in other forms of unskeptical thinking as well. I mean, take people like the moon landing deniers, or the global warming deniers. Whilst I don't want to go in flat earthers, whilst I don't want to go in and talk about those particular forms of denialism, but I've actually been there where I've sat down next to somebody who was an atheist, but was a climate change denier. And no matter what I said to him in terms of the evidence that's been produced, he just said, "Oh, you're just a warmist." As if we were the one. Yeah, that was the phrase he used, warmists.
Yeah. I've had this when I've been lecturing on evolutionary psychology, and there's always a few hands go up and say, but my religious elders say that that's not the case with monkeys, and also the earth is only 4,000 years old, so how can that possibly be? And I take the time to actually sit down with a little group of them afterwards, and I get a big sheet of paper out and I draw my version of an evolutionary tree to show how this thing actually works. And it just straight over the top. And then next week, a couple of them come back and say, "No, I had a word with my church elders, and they said you're wrong." So,
that's all right then.
What can I do? Right, what can I do?
Your church elders are wrong. No, your church elders are wrong. And I've demonstrated that I think I've mentioned it before. These people go into send mode rather than receive mode. But I do sometimes wonder if they even have a receive mode if the person that they're talking to is not one of their church people. It is brainwashing. There's no other word. I know that's a very controversial within the psychological field. I know that's a very controversial term.
Yeah, we just use the colloquial concept.
Yeah, we'll just use the colloquial term this time. But what do you do with that? I mean, Mark, I know that you do teach. I mean, I teach, but I don't teach anything that this particular topic falls into, except actually for a few technical things around criminological theory and things like the broken windows theory, which I use as scare quotes. But when you're talking to people about actual science, how many of these people do you get a year?
It could be several hundred.
Really?
So, yeah, and I'll say, what's that on your desk there? You've got a pile of textbooks, and it's all the latest scientific research. And the bit we're studying now is evolutionary psychology. All the references in there are just a couple of years old. It's all backed up by science, and you're going back to your church elders and then
Who know
coming back
nothing about this themselves.
and telling me that, well, why are you paying for this course? What's the point of you studying this course if you're just going to listen to your church elders? So it's just sticking fingers in ears. Why would you listen to your church elders rather than get an education at a university? What's the point of coming to university if you're just listening to your church elders?
Well, what do they say to that when you ask them?
It just seems to go in one ear and out the other.
Yeah, and this is the reason why we have to keep refuting these arguments, because and we talk about planting seeds, and sometimes you may have planted a few seeds in a couple of those individuals that you've spoken to. They may follow it up, they may not. But I remember there was a wonderful meme that was put up a little while ago. It said, in my day, people who denied science, we called that failing when it came to their science classes. So these arguments are everywhere, and they keep coming up. I mean, I've got a load more examples. So
just before you go on to those examples, Rich, you were talking about William Lane Craig. And one of the you're talking about, he's been refuted time and time again to his face in lectures or in discussion. One of the best ones that you can find on the internet is one with Sean Carroll.
Yes,
which
we've linked to that before, I think.
Yeah, we have linked to that before.
It is such a glorious thing. I think we should link to it again.
Yeah, you see, and the thing is, I mean, in debate, if you're not used to this, in debate you have openers, both person has 15 minutes or whatever it is, and then they'll rebut, and then questions after that, and it goes to and fro. And William Lane Craig did his spiel, his sales spiel for his book and all that sort of thing, because he wrote the book, The Cosmological Argument, the Kalam Cosmological Argument. And so he went through his opener, and then Sean Carroll came back and within probably about 7 or 8 sentences completely rebutted it. I mean, totally professionally and scientifically completely rebutted it.
Yeah.
In his opening statement.
Yeah. Yeah.
And even though he rebutted every single point straight off the bat, when William Lane Craig came back, he just carried on as if he had heard nothing. And you've got to take your hat off to him in some ways, because it is completely blinkered. He has a book to sell. They make a lot of money out of this. People like Ken Ham and that sort of thing. They make a lot of cash out of this.
A lot.
And this is the thing that I think people who take their side need to understand. They're not doing it because they have an argument for God. They don't have it. There is no argument for God. What they have is a cash cow. And it's a bit like Deepak Chopra and all those sort of people. You talk about the woo-woo side of life and things like that. They do this because they have a book to sell or a course to sell, and you've got to stop to think: are they doing it for the right reasons? Because if they've been rebutted time and time again, then and they've not listened and they've not even looked into it, or all those sort of things, they're not doing it to find that path of truth. They're doing it to fool you into the concept that you literally buy into, just because God's a cash cow basically for them.
I would like one of the debaters who go up against one of these individuals, who have done their research on what has been refuted in their faces, and actually ask the William Lane Craigs or the Ken Hams or the Ray Comforts of this world, this was debunked in front of you with overwhelming evidence on this occasion, this occasion, this occasion, and this occasion. Why are you still using those same arguments which have effectively been disproven? Why are you still using them? And actually take that tack and actually ask them why they are still using these Pratt arguments. Why are you still using arguments? And actually ask them in the course of that debate, that particular question, rather than addressing the actual arguments they make, because they have been refuted so many times. Actually ask them, why are you continuing to use this argument that has already been debunked and debunked multiple times to your face?
But the one thing I sort of question is, if you've ever seen, I mean, if you've not seen someone like William Lane Craig, he's not a stupid man.
No.
You know, he's a very clever guy, you know, and he structures his arguments well. I mean, they're wrong, but he structures his arguments well, and he delivers things incredibly professionally. So the guy's not stupid.
No.
And to me, that what that's showing is that he knows that it's been debunked before he gets to the stand, before he does his next speech. He knows it's been debunked, and he knows that it's been debunked successfully on numerous occasions, and yet he still does it. So that's why you know, we've got to understand the reasons why he's doing it. It's not to prove God; it's to sell his book.
Yeah.
He's a businessman. He's a businessman, and that he needs followers. He wants people to join his church, whatever you want to call it. Some of them do actually have churches, and that's big money. Certainly in the States, it really is massive amounts of money.
Yeah,
I mean, we do this because we know what we're talking about. We enjoy it, and we don't need the money because we're all multimillionaires anyway. So you know, we don't need to sell books, which is why we do it. Because
and just to let you know, though, guys, you know, I have put all of this down in my latest book. Only $24.99.
Absolute bargain for Christmas.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But again, but you know what William Lane Craig will say, because he's already said it. He says, "But I have the inner witness of the Holy Spirit."
Yeah, someone whispered in his ear.
Which in itself is another refuted argument.
Yes.
But if we turn that around just a little bit, sounds like a trivial example, but it's come up lots of times in other podcasts we've done. When we asked for proof of God, especially if the Jehovah's Witnesses come around, their idea of evidence is just pointing to a tree in my garden.
Yeah,
and
look at
saying,
the trees.
God did it. I mean, that's not evidence. So the idea of what evidence is not understood at all. Scientific evidence is very different from personal evidence and saying, "Oh, I've got experience of God. God speaks to me. Jesus is in my heart." That's not evidence at all. That's just whatever's happening in your mind. Completely different to scientific evidence that's cost lots and lots of money and hard sweat and tears to actually come up with.
And notwithstanding the peer review process either.
Indeed, yes.
Having written a couple of articles myself for academic journals, the peer review process is
brutal.
It can be brutal.
It can be brutal because see, this is the other thing with science. If you put a hypothesis out, if you put a paper out, scientists are the first people who are going to go wrong. You're wrong. You're an idiot. You're a fool. You've gone down the wrong road, and all that sort of thing. And we'll do that.
And they'll tell you why you're wrong. Though.
Yeah, exactly.
They will tell
exactly.
you why you're wrong.
But the point is that they you know, these scientific papers only get through if you've basically got it right. You know, there might be some little bits and pieces which you're not quite sure on, but basically your hypothesis is right, because other scientists go in, they look at it, they test it, they do experiments to either prove or disprove what you've just said. And that's why it goes. So this is why, you know, when you talk about things like the theory of evolution, and people say it's just a theory because they're using that colloquial term. It's a theory.
There's another
Like
one.
Something I pulled out my butt,
Yeah.
just some idea I pulled out my butt, which might be right. And it's not that. Theory is incredibly strong. It's all the evidence that we have.
It's the well-tested and
well-tested, proven.
tested. Yeah. Well evidenced, not necessarily proven. Well evidenced explanatory framework. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just like the theory of gravity. We know it's there, and there's research going on all the time to see how it works.
Oh, look.
We don't quite know yet, but it'll get there.
Yeah, but Rich, according to the flat earthers, that's because the flat plane of the earth is moving up.
It's accelerating upwards, yes. But as I say, so that process, as I say, can be brutal. And they don't want to go through that because they know that it won't survive.
Yeah.
But I think one of the things that we need to do as sort of a society is to make sure that we are properly educated to respond to some of these. Because I mean, I'm going to go to one of the most intellectual sources possible. There was a few years ago a series of Celebrity Big Brother, and one of the guests on this abomination of a TV show was an actor by the name of I think it was Stephen Baldwin, one of the great Baldwin clan, who is a hardcore evangelical Bible-believing young Earth creationist Christian, and he raised the I don't believe evolution is true, and he used the monkeys argument, and the rest of the housemates sort of like sat looking at him as if, I don't believe you've actually said that. But none of them knew how to actually respond. And I thought, if I were there, I would have had him metaphorically skinned alive. But they didn't know how to respond.
But that's interesting as well, though, Rich, isn't it? That when someone says something which just sounds ridiculous, something like the monkey argument.
Like the monkey argument.
When someone says that, you notice that the your average person, it doesn't really know how to respond to that because they haven't really thought about it. A thing that we're accused of, and I guess atheists and skeptics in general are accused of, is that we're just buying that argument. We've read the book, this book on evolution, and we've just believed it on faith.
And that's another one.
Yeah, I mean, just to come back to that, Andy, for those of you who are out there who thinks we just sit around here having a good time and cups of tea, no, we actually know what we're talking about because we've been atheists all our lives, and the things we say are things we researched and read in great detail. We don't just sit here and make things up, as a lot of people who are religious just take
like
things
a lot of
on
religious
blind
people
faith.
do. Yeah.
So there's a lot of hard work and research gone into what we've done all the way through our lives. So it's not just something we've taken on board at all. We actually do know what we're talking about and we can back it up.
And do you know where a lot of that comes from is when you talk to a theist and they come up with some sort of argument. Because when I first started, when I first became an atheist, which was probably when I was about 15, okay, I had never really had that many conversations about God belief, the concept of God belief. It never really sort of occurred to me to do that, and I didn't for years. And so I knew I was an atheist. I called myself an atheist from about 15, but until I was probably 25, even 30, I'd never really started having discussions, and I'd never I'd asked questions of my vicar when I was a kid, but I just went to work, lived life, did things, didn't really worry about it. And it wasn't until I was sort of maybe 25, 30 that I started talking about these things. And I started questioning things, which is 30 years ago now. And I didn't know the answers to a lot of things that apologists would say. And I talk about apologists, I'm talking about sort of amateur apologists, someone who just has heard that argument, like the ontological argument, or the cosmological argument, or the argument from consciousness, or the argument from design, all those sort of things. And they said, well, what about so and so? And I didn't really have an answer for a lot of that. I instinctively thought it was probably wrong, but I couldn't argue against it. And that was when I started reading up more and more about things like the argument from, what is the argument from design? What does it actually, what's the actual, tenets of that argument? What do I need to understand to even just get in the conversation? And so you can imagine that most people, when they're sort of, someone's at your front door and they say, yeah, God exists, look at the trees, or look at miracles, and look at this sort of thing and that. You can understand that most people just go, well, it doesn't sound right, but I don't even want the argument. I don't really know what I'm talking about. Yeah. So we've probably had to find out a little bit more. And it's been really good for me, because I've learned so much. I've learned so much about the Bible. I've learned so much about more about science than I've ever done, at school. Yeah. Because you have to read about this stuff to understand where are they getting it wrong, and how are they getting it wrong. If the information is there and they're trying to use that information in a misguided way, they must sort of know what the information is in the first place. But most people, when you get people at the door, the Jehovah's Witnesses, and you talk about, the Bible sanctioning slavery or something like that, they have no clue. They say, where's that? And so we've got to know about that. We've got to know where that is, I mean, I've got a few Bibles scattered around the flat at the moment, and a couple of them I've actually started keeping little sticky tabs. So if anybody does knock on my door, they don't for some reason anymore. I have no idea why. Read that.
Yeah.
He's training for the JWs.
Yeah, and you know what? They refuse to.
Yeah.
They refuse to read it, even though it's in their own book. They refuse to read it because they don't want to know the answer.
Or you've read it wrong. You've not read it in context. Which is another one.
Yep.
Yeah. You're reading it out of context.
Another one. Yeah. We should have a little bell, and every time
a few years ago, and thankfully the JWs don't come around because of the pandemic, which is absolutely brilliant, because I was really, really plagued by them. But a few years ago, when I answered the door, which I thought was a delivery, and then you see two people standing there. Oh no! Should have looked through the glass pane first before I did that. And I said, okay, right. I'll tell you what. Let's swap some literature. You give me your Watchtower, because I do like to laugh. And I gave them one of the printed versions of the pamphlets we got on our UK website, which explains exactly what atheism is.
Link below.
They wouldn't touch it. They wouldn't even take it off me to see what it was. They just wouldn't have it at all. That's after I said I was an atheist. But they still wanted to chat to me, but they wouldn't take the bit of paper.
Well, I would say to them, look, you're coming to me wanting to give me your bit of paper. Why aren't you willing to take mine? Why aren't you willing to take it?
They've probably been told not to. Don't get involved in the arguments. That's what they're probably. Again, it's a sales call, Rich. It's literally a sales call.
And I think we do need to start turning these things around, and rather engaging with the PRATT arguments themselves, start engaging with, why are you doing this, or why are you not doing this? So
Rich, what you do is you ask them, have you ever thought about moving away from God? We have a meeting.
Yes.
The trouble is, when JWs visit your house, they're actually on a training apprentice mission, so they have to do so many and go out and do that. So I've just given up saying, I told the last lot who came a few days ago, or a week ago, or a month ago, or the one before that, different people all the time. I told them, go back to your hall, tell everybody and your elders, take my address off and never ever come back here again. And they just send another 2 people. So
Yeah.
it's absolutely pointless. So I just don't answer the door anymore.
And in fact, actually, when one of the interesting things, actually, again, talking to my friend who's an ex-JW, when they're going out in pairs like that, one of them is usually noticeably younger.
Yeah.
And they are being trained. And what he says is, if you're really going to do something, when you're engaging in conversation, talk to the younger one. Ask questions of the younger one. Don't preach to the younger one. Don't preach atheism to the younger one.
No.
Ask questions of the younger one. And as I said, the thing with the pamphlet, you expect me to take your pamphlet. Why is it unreasonable for me to expect you to take mine? Why is it unreasonable? You've come to my address. You're, for want of a better expression, selling this to me. Okay, so why won't you take what I've got? And not only take it, but read it. Because, but as you say, they wouldn't even touch the thing as if it was cursed or something, which they probably thought it was.
Yeah, I think it was after I told them I was an atheist. So
yeah.
I've actually seen a few occasions, because I've had this for the last 40 years, where an adult is there with somebody who is not just young, but plainly a child. I mean, not a very young child, but plainly it's on the cusp of going to secondary school or something. So they are quite young, just into early teens, and I think that's very wrong.
But the other thing, and this is I think also quite important. I know we've strayed away from Pratt arguments at the moment, but I think this is actually quite important. They're not coming to you actually to sell you something. They're coming to you expecting to be shouted at. They're coming to you to expect to have their door slammed in their face, and for them to go back to their hall and say, "See, it's an evil world out there. Look at the heathens. This is why we've got to continue having faith to." And it's about actually shoring up their own belief system that the world is an evil place and everybody in it are evil sinners, and we are the righteous ones. Because look, we're the ones that are being shouted and sworn at. We're the ones having the doors slammed in our face. So again, just a word of advice: when they do come round, be really nice to them.
Yeah.
And
I'm always nice.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I know. But what I mean is, don't shout and swear. Yes, ask them questions, but do it in a polite and respectful way, even if you don't actually feel like being polite and respectful. Because I know there are times when I really don't, when I see some of the absolute BS that they're spouting. But you getting aggressive very, 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 very rarely works. Very rarely, to the point where it's actually, I don't think, worth doing it like that. But ask those probing questions, as I say. But I've just told you how that tree has come about. We know how trees grow. We know the chemical reactions that take place when you plant a seed. We know how a seed germinates. We know how the seed takes nutrients from the soil to build to build and grow. We know how that happens. It's not a miracle. It's actually a well understood process. No God is required. And you'll eventually get back to as far as they can go, which is, where did the universe come from? Now, that in itself is another Pratt argument, because, we don't know where the universe come from. But making stuff up to try and explain it when you've got no independent evidence for the thing you've just made up in the first place is not an answer. And as I say, so the origin of the universe, because evolution doesn't explain where life came from, therefore it must be false. But that's not evolution's job.
It's a completely different subject, to be honest.
And it's a completely different subject.
Biogenesis, which I do point out to quite a few people when they talk about well, you don't even know where life comes from. It's like, well, not yet.
No,
But that's the
and we
whole
don't.
point of science. We're digging back further and further. We're understanding more and more, and there is actually really, really strong hypothesis on
Yeah.
how life began.
And in fact, the fact that there are already naturalistic hypotheses, even though there's more than one, but there are naturalistic hypotheses of how life came about. They are already better if you use the principles of Occam's razor. They're already better explanations than God did it, because God doing it is actually probably, the invoking of this incredibly complex supernatural being for which there is no evidence at all is not as good an answer as any answer that's bound in natural forces, which
It's
we know
incredibly
exist.
lazy. I mean, this is the whole thing. I mean, there was that phrase. Science is hard, religion is easy, people are lazy. And that's really the bottom line to it. When you put something like origins of the universe, well, we don't know what did it. Well, I know it's God. I mean, it's just like incredibly lazy answer to start with, because you don't know. I mean, I've actually questioned people. How do you know God started it?
Yeah,
Because I've been told.
As you said earlier. Go on, Evans.
You got no proof.
Just coming back to the monkey evolutionary argument, people who come up with that, they're not spouting it out their own heads. They're actually spouting what their religious leaders have said, or what other people have told them. So they've never thought about it for themselves. And I know from experience, it's absolutely pointless to say, look, you're completely wrong on this. I really suggest you go off and read about evolution. And I think, no, that's a silly thing to do, because one, they're not going to do it. And I've been studying evolution for the last 40 years. So, and I still haven't got to the bottom of it. So that's not going to happen at all. And evolutionary science is evolving, excuse the pun, all the time. So you have to be running to keep up with the scientific advances. So telling a religious person to go and read about evolution is not going to work, because they wouldn't know where to start.
The general public actually don't understand evolution. I don't fully understand evolution, but the concept, just the general concept of evolution is completely understandable. The basics of evolution is completely understandable. And when you read about specifics, specific parts of that to try and understand how things fit together, because you're not an evolutionary biologist. You're not going to university to try and find this out. So there's got to be some way of just trying to understand it on a very basic level.
Well, I mean,
and
great
there's a
example.
lot of good books about that.
Yeah, great example actually was myself. I mean, I didn't really understand evolution at all until I read, would you believe, The God Delusion. And the chapter that Richard Dawkins had in The God Delusion on evolution. And that actually blew my mind more than the anti-religious stuff in there, although that was fantastic reading. Because I always believed that evolution itself was a chance process. And I was actually happy with that anyway. And when I started reading, and he said, evolution is not a chance process.
Yeah.
And I thought, what? But I always thought it was. And I was in my 30s when I read that book. It's not a chance process. And I was already, a believer in evolution, because it made sense to me that organisms change over time. And I started reading the detail. And after reading Dawkins's book on religion, I started reading his actual books on evolution. In fact, my favorite of his books now is Unweaving the Rainbow, which I think is a great book about seeking meaning through science. And that's my favorite of his books.
Because he did the Selfish Gene, didn't he, as well?
Yes, that came out in the 70s.
Yeah.
73, I think. Yeah.
Actually, do you know the interesting thing about this whole concept is that if you don't really understand it, you can read the basics about it, and you can bring that on board and understand how that actually works. But you know, if you look at the way a theist would argue against that, you look at this concept of change. You know, these words matter when we're talking about these things. And again, another Pratt argument is, how could it just happen by chance? And it's problematic when you use things like words like chance in there, because it gives the impression that it's a magic trick in some respects, and that's what they want to believe. Again, straw man argument
isn't, and their argument isn't a magic trick.
Yeah, I know, but they've got to fight back with something. So, you know, but using some specific words which, you know, things come by naturalistic means, let's say. But what are they? And that's what we're sort of going into. But the argument that we get all the time is that you're just believing evolution on faith. How could it just come into existence from nothing? You know,
and we never argued that.
That there's nothing, and if there's something called nothing, then it's not nothing. You know, so words mean a lot in this, and just random chance is the thing that's thrown at us all the time. Evolution apparently is just random chance.
I mean,
it's not random chance.
No, I mean the mutations within DNA, yes, they are random, but the survival of those mutations is not a matter of randomness.
This is where they get things mixed up, because the word in there is random.
So they think the whole thing is random.
So it's just all random. And this is why it's so difficult to explain to people about things like evolution, because they keep on coming up with these words, latching onto them, applying it to the whole. So according to theists and creationists and all those sort of people, you know, it just came by chance. It's completely random. There's no point to it. Well, we've got something which has got a point to it, and it's the loving God, you know, who created
random has got a very specific scientific term and the relative.
Yeah, well, this is what I'm saying. So words have specific scientific meaning, like theory and random. But there's also the colloquial version of those words.
Yeah, like street speak, random. Yeah, you know, like teenagers say he did. But they also got you know, religious people, creationists, who try and kid you that they're aware of evolution, and then they go and spoil it by saying it's got some sort of intent.
The purpose.
Like it's got some sort of agency. Like there's some sort of agency behind it.
It's when you I was just actually about to come in when you said the word purpose. You know, well, maybe there is no purpose beyond maybe, but it's not even a conscious purpose. Survival,
but it's not a purpose.
But that's not a purpose.
Evolution does not have a purpose.
No, it doesn't.
There's no agency behind it that's promoting a purpose.
And then they go into, well, if there's no purpose, what's the point? Another one.
Different argument.
And another Pratt argument. You know, if there is no purpose, then, you know, what is the point? And he said, well, does there need to be a point?
Oh, you see how difficult this is, you know. So, you know, saying we'll read about evolution. Yes, you can, you know, get a concept of the basic process of it. And you know, for all these years, I thought I had a pretty good handle on, you know, evolutionary processes until I started to read a book which is about this thick called Speciation, which is a very scientific book. And my head was spinning. It really was. And I had to lie down in the dark room after. You know,
and we accept the concept.
Yeah, indeed. So it's very, very difficult.
Yeah. So anyway, listen, I think that's what we've covered a hell of a lot on the.
Well, just my usual final question then: what do we do about these Pratt arguments? Do we continue arguing them? Do we continue signposting people to things? I mean, for example, I'm sure people out there in the atheosphere know R&R. He's done a whole series of videos called the Pratt List, and addressing 15 of these arguments that he has encountered over the years, which is very good. And I'll send the link, and we'll put the link into that playlist. You know, they're not difficult to understand the way he describes them. So, you know, continue planting seeds. But
yeah, definitely. Yeah, I
but
mean, we've already done a couple of the sort of the biggies, you know, the cosmological, and I think we did the teleological argument.
We did the ontological. No, we did the teleological, and we did the teleological argument. We did the cosmological argument, and we've done the argument for morality.
Argument for morality. So I think, you know, this is one of the things that is a good platform for us to just talk about some of those. We'll do a few more of those, and, you know, some of the biggies, and then maybe just like mop up with another podcast with, you know, the top 10 smaller ones or something like that. Because
and it might be actually quite nice when they're available. Our ex-theist hosts, when they're both available, bring them on and ask them what these arguments were like when they were believers, and where they were coming from when they were believers. And I think that would be a really interesting podcast to examine that from their former point of view, rather than us, of course, making assumptions about religious people, because we've never been religious people. We can only act on what we see, act and interpret on what we actually see and encounter. It'd be really nice to get it from the horse's mouth, as it were. Not that our ex-believer friends are horses, of course. So it'd be really nice if we could do that at some point. But as ever, folks out there, if you've got any ideas, or what's your favorite Pratt argument? What is your favorite Pratt argument? And post it in the comments, and maybe we'll dip into that and have a look in a future podcast on what some of your favorite ones are.
I still want to use the acronym PRATT, though. I like that.
Oh yeah.
And we just, you know, continue planting seeds, as you know, we've said before, being polite and asking those, you know, key questions. Who told you that? And how do you know that?
Are you even listening to the words that I am saying to you? You know, when I'm explaining this, are you actually listening to me?
Yeah, it's the processing of the words, isn't it? Look, guys, I think that's absolutely perfect. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Click on the little link below. Just subscribe to that channel. It's growing every month. So
yes. So thank you to everybody out there that has.
Yeah. Subscribe and leave comments, ask questions, do all the usual things, and we'll see you next time. See you later.
Bye, everybody. See you soon.
Well, thanks for joining us today, and don't forget to click that like button. Also, make a comment, and of course, subscribe to the channel. We'll see you next time.